Part 2 of the Germantown Colony in Webster Parish, outside of the city limits of Minden, Louisiana. The Germantown Colony, founded by Count de Leon in 1835. The museum is, simply put, time stood still. In the previous attached video is more of the history and a tour of the colony. And this is the details of the founder, community, and the experience of a spiritual worker as I traveled through this time stood still. As we go through the history of the Germantown Colony, we will also touch on the overlapping of the founder of Minden, Louisiana, the Native American history of the same location, and truths of the history of this small area. And we'll also touch on the spiritual aspect beneath it all. Living in the surrounding area, I always was told that the Germans come to the U.S. and made this colony and then moved on. But once you really search for the truth, you find out many fascinating things about history. So let's start with the story of the founder of the Germantown Colony, Count Leon. He was born as Bernard Mueller in Germany in 1788 and claimed to be a spiritual leader. By the late 1820s, he set out to form a utopia communal settlement in the United States. He preached and gathered followers, and there are many stories about his birth. It was known and said that around the time frame that Count Leon was born, that a child was going to be born, gifted into his family. And also, when he was born, he was taken to another family of nobility. The stories are that the family knew he was coming and knew about his knowing. More of a prophetic birth. Either they didn't want him to become what he was supposed to become, or they didn't want anyone to know. There really is no for sure reason why he was immediately taken and raised in another family. Though this happened, there is another story of other ties with royalty, and then another where a child of a worker was born, sent to a Catholic church, and began being prosecuted because he went out and was preaching, testifying of the second coming of Jesus, and they asked where he learned all that he was saying. And he told them, "You," hence the Catholic Church. And of course, there was an argument and a lot of prosecution and a lot of back and forth over the situation. At the Germantown Colony Museum, I was read a letter that is signed Doctor of Theology as Samuel, that called himself Count de Leon, in line of Judah, anointed of the Lord and divine messenger, Archduke Maximilian von Este. Of course, I probably didn't pronounce that correctly, but Archduke of Holy Zion and Jerusalem. Archduke Maximilian von Este is another name that Count Leon went by. Count Leon in Germany was considered more of a mystic and communal healer than he was a preacher. But his followers saw him as a prophetic figure and visionary guide. He mixed his Christianity and mysticism with a hopeful communalism. It resonated with a lot of people. He was also considered an alchemist, which in this video you will see an alchemy book that is still at the Germantown Colony Museum. Being an alchemist and an active learner, he was always on the lookout for the Philosopher's Stone. He began to gather more and more followers until finally they escaped to the United States as a community. And Count Leon led these people down the Mississippi for a better future, and specifically freedom of religion, freedom of their spiritual beliefs. Of course, through this journey is how they changed their names, and there's much more research to be done. In Germany, Count Leon was a member of the Harmony Society, which is mainly tied to the German-speaking immigrants in Pennsylvania. As he led his followers down the Mississippi, actively on the lookout for this stone and using his mysticism, alchemy, prophecy, and much more, along with his healing abilities, he was steadily building this utopia. And before they could actually get to what ended up being Minden, Louisiana, yet Minden, Louisiana was not founded at this time. On the outskirts of what is now the city limits, Count Leon died in 1834 in Louisiana from yellow fever. But his wife, Countess Leon, picked up the community and kept on to further and finish and make his dream a reality. By the time it was built and founded, it was 1835, what is now known as the Germantown Colony Museum. This might be a picture of Countess Leon. With my research, it is said they had 3 children, but according to my research, there are no direct descendants by DNA to her or her children, though the museum can tell you a whole lot more. This is the book of organic chemistry, a textbook from 1827 that was brought with them from Germany. It's thought to actually be Count Leon's. For anyone who doesn't know what alchemy is, it's working with energy, energetic vibes, and creating things from energy. And of course, look it up, do some research. But it is a spiritual situation, a spiritual work. This time visiting the colony, I discovered and was informed that the horseshoe at the top of the door, if you don't know, is a symbol of luck, and it's also a symbol of a ward, a spiritual ward to ward off evil spirits, negative energy, or just anything that we don't want to play with. And to see it on the workman's door was actually very fascinating to me. It's a form of protection, spiritual protection. Soon I saw my spirit animal, my crow, landed to let me know that everything was good. As I look at this land and all the things I felt and knew and look at, you can just simply see the beauty of this land, feel and see the history within the trees that still stand and the water. The water. In the previous video of the tour of this museum / colony, you'll see more about this. Water holds energy, and there are 8 to 9 wells on the property. Knowing what I know now about Count Leon and his wife, his community, and being raised, literally raised not far from this area, it's fascinating that I had never been there before a couple years ago, and I'm blown away by the spiritual intenseness. This is a picture of their traveling to the U.S. Someone painted, and I was shown who represents who throughout this museum of actual items that were recovered and perfectly preserved. This painting, they were able to show me who represented who, and there are so many pictures, and just like this. So much has been preserved so well. Here we have the French Bible that come with them, dated to 1727. And remember, look how well they took care of their things. Remember, Count Leon is said to be a prophet. There was a story of the prophecy of his birth coming, a mystic, an alchemist, and he put his Christianity with his spiritual life that far back in time. Now here is where I become fascinated. When I walked in front of this dress stood a woman in spirit. And if you are not new to me, you know that I am a Christian psychic medium. I'm called a seer. I've been called a light worker, a earth angel. I have been called so many things, even on the prophetic side. So as I saw this woman and then looked at the picture next to it, it wasn't the same woman. But I continued with the tour and with my research, and recently finally read what is underneath the picture of the woman wearing a dress. When I walked in and I saw the woman looking at her dress, she looked at me and said, "I wore that." And that was it. But this is what it reads. Wedding dress of 1860. Mrs. Murphy of Minden modeled a wedding gown worn by her grandmother's sister over a century ago. So eventually this dress was handed down and in the possession of a great niece of the original bride, until her passing, at which time it was given to her sister. She wore this dress the same day that her only sister also got married. I would like to pronounce her name, but yeah, my German isn't that good. There is a book, Fragments of a Dream, by Rita Moore Krause. If you want to do any more research on this colony, as I will be doing. Countess Leon kept the community going with Dr. Krause and many other members of the community. It is literally time stood still. The way that they have preserved this history is phenomenal. So you have to go check it out. If you are part of the spiritual community, you might want to do the same. Either way, this is history. This is God's earth, and this is a perfect example of how we need, as humanity, to respect the history of our ancestors and respect each other, and the perfect example of how spirituality, Christianity, and all other religions and beliefs kind of mix in one. Count Leon preached about the second coming of Christ. He was a Christian. He was prophetic. He was known as God spoke through him. That is prophecy. That is communication with God. And some will say with spirit. His wife, Countess Leon, kept his vision going. And until it faded out, and with the history and the research I have done, which is coming next, technically she was pushed out. But the colony closed in 1871. So she and one of her daughters moved to Hot Springs, Arkansas, where she lived and died in 1881. It is said that there's a museum in Hot Springs where Count Leon's alchemy cards are. My recent visit to Hot Springs and to the travel center and other ways, I was not able to find that area of exactly where these cards are. But my next trip, as I go often, I will find Count Leon's cards. Every bit of this story is amazing, and throughout time, as I've always done videos this way, I will soon be tying in how the founder of Minden, Louisiana plays into all of this, and our Native American land in this exact area. So I hope that you like, share, follow along, and walk through just a little bit of the history of Minden, Louisiana, Webster Parish, surrounding areas, Shreveport, Spring Hill, Shongaloo, and much, much more. There is so much spiritual history within our location, and so much history in general that we as a humanity need to keep alive. And I want to thank those that continue to preserve the Germantown Colony. I have been to a lot of historical places and have yet to ever see a historical site preserved as beautifully as this one.